Thank you very much. I just want to ask another question if Professor Qumsiyeh or Mrs. Poureisa are with us right now. Uh, uh, what do you think that expect that other Muslim countries, Arab countries, or other people all around the world could do to support this idea of referendum? Because as we see, the governments are not supporting this idea right now. So there is some expectations from people all around the world that they could do to support this idea and force their countries to uh, support this idea of referendum. So, what do you think that people could do all around the world? Mr. Gumsiye, if you're with us, we're hearing from you.
Well, I mean, if you look at historical examples, it provides us with good models. Colonialism and racism is not something new in human history. We've had it for hundreds of years, primarily European colonization, of course. And if we look at history of other countries, there are over 194 countries now part of the UN, and there are many other territories like Palestine, etc., that are not part of the UN system. But just about every country and territory on earth has suffered from colonialism as an illness, if you want to call it. And what happened in those countries is a guide. I mean, there's Algerian model, which was very bloody, 1 million, 2 million Algerians killed. 1 million French had to pack their bags and go to Europe. This is very rare, by the way. And the other model is the model of what happened in Australia and the United States. That's what they're called now. But that's genocide of the indigenous people. The most common model is the model that exists in most of the world in over 170 countries by my count. And that's descendants of the colonizers and descendants of the colonized live together in one country after a process that Nahid described as decolonization correctly. That's needed, is decolonization. Now, how do we don't have to go back to decolonization, and that happened 200 years ago in some countries or 300 years ago. We can go back just in the past 100 years and look at what countries decolonized and how it happened and what was the role of the international community in that. I don't have too much time to go through this, but I wrote a lot extensively in my books and articles about that. For example, I just cite a couple of quick examples. I mean, if you look at decolonization in South Africa, this is still an ongoing process, of course, but there was racism and colonization in South Africa and apartheid, of course, as a symptom of this. What happened there is there was a mobilization of the global community, as mentioned by your other guest, also via boycott, divestment, sanctions on the apartheid regime in South Africa to force it basically to relent and give equal rights, or at least give voting rights, maybe not equal rights yet, but voting rights for the majority of South Africans who happen to be Black descendants of the indigenous people, Zulus and so forth. And of course, it's an ongoing process. The process of decolonization continues in just about every country that I know of, from, for example, Brazil, Mexico, many, many countries in Asia, even Europe has a process of decolonization since they were also colonized in different parts of Europe by the Romans, etc., and they were colonizers themselves, biggest colonizers. So to decolonize requires First and foremost, the resistance of the local people. That's natural, the resistance of the local people determines the course of colonization and decolonization. And Palestinians had a long history of resistance. And when I speak about the resistance, by the way, please don't jump into conclusion that I'm speaking about armed resistance only. Armed resistance is a small part of the resistance. Most resistance is non-armed. I wrote a book called Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment, because it's a history of success. It's a history of brilliance, innovative actions of resistance. And again, I don't have time to go through it. But this is the key factor, is the local resistance. Now, to your question, I mean, if you have an illness, let's say you got COVID-19, your internal immune response is the key to recovery, but it doesn't hurt to also take something external, vitamin C, lemon juice, chicken soup, whatever, zinc, things like that help. So that actually also stimulates your immune response. So the same thing can be spoken about social phenomena. Support from outside is always welcome and appreciated, and sometimes needed. Of course, interventions from outside can be critical in some situations, especially when you have genocide ongoing. It's really important to have interventions from outside to stop a genocide. That happened in previous history again. So history tells us a lot of lessons about the importance of global participation. And by global participation, we can divide it into government and non-governments. Of course, you can expect the people to be the most supportive of oppressed people around the world, whether people in the United States or Iran or Yemen or Lebanon or England. The people, when they know there's an oppressed people, they want to help. So that's a people, and people are usually globally ahead of their governments on many things, especially in Western governments. We saw that with South Africa. Just about every Western government supported the apartheid regime in South Africa when it was at the height of killing people, like the Soweto uprising, and what the reaction of the white minority government in suppressing the Soweto uprising. They used machine guns on children, etc. The people supported South Africans in their struggle. The governments lagged behind. And the US and other European countries, I remember this because I'm old enough. Ronald Reagan, when he came to power in 1980, he said the ANC is a terrorist organization. Nelson Mandela is a terrorist, should be kept in jail forever. And so on and so forth. And we support South Africa struggle against those quote unquote communists. Of course, many of them were not communists. Many of them, like Desmond Tutu, were very even religious Christians and Muslims in South Africa who struggled against apartheid, also with communists and socialists, of course. But anyways, he was talking about domino effect, like they were talking about Vietnam in the 1960s. If we let Vietnam win, then there will be a domino effect, and Western world will lose. Well, the Western, hegemonic power loses, but not, the people in the West. So anyways, this is what you have. You have the situation, history, as Hegel once said, what humans learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. We tend to keep repeating the same mistakes. And the Western governments especially keep repeating the same problems, supporting apartheid, supporting genocide, supporting colonialism. And we rely on the people of those countries to rise up and say enough is enough. And that's what happened with South Africa under apartheid, and that's what I think will happen with Palestine. There's already movement, as you know, in campuses around the world. Young people especially are mobilized. But of course, you know, there's a war against those people. Just like in the 60s, there was a war against the people who were engaged in, you know, protesting the Vietnam War, or in the you know, in 2003, there was protests against the war on the people of Iraq, or others, you know, in Yemen. There's movement of people. How successful these movements are, you know, we'll see what happens, but I am optimistic that these movements globally is important. There are some governments, of course, that certainly stood with the Palestinian people consistently, like Iran and Yemen and Algeria, and even Spain, by the way. Spanish government is more friendly to Palestinians than they are to apartheid and genocide. You know, but we need a lot more of the governments, of course, to mobilize. And South Africa, certainly the government of South Africa brought case against Israel in International Court of Justice, which is about genocide. You know, there's cases at the International Criminal Court against Netanyahu and his army and so forth. There's the Hague group that's meeting even as we speak. So there's movements. The question remains, you know, how effective these movements are and how strong they will build and how quickly they will build, because the genocide is ongoing and every day there are people being killed. And of course, you know, unlike South Africa, South Africa did not have strong pro-apartheid lobbies in Western governments, where Israel has a very strong, we don't underestimate, pro-Zionist lobby in countries like the United States, which is now suppressing free speech at campuses, or in London, or in Paris, or in Berlin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Qumsiyeh. And from Mrs. Poureisa, if you could just give us a short answer, could you add any point to this? What could people around the world do to enforce the solution mentioned in the referendum? I mean, could you add any point to the points that
Sure.
Mr. Qumsiyeh told us?
Sure, thank you so much. Well, the response was already complete enough, but if I'm allowed, I would add more points to it. I think the first thing and the last thing people can do across the world is to keep and maintain the hope that the resistance and the liberation of Palestinians is going to overcome this very unfair battle. And by saying that, it's not rhetoric. Today we have the highest level of mention of Palestine in the world after October 7. So people these days are losing hope. They like, okay, I'm watching the genocide. More children, more than 20,000 children have been murdered by Israeli regime. So what it can do for me to just talk about Palestine or share some posts on social media. And actually, to be honest, it does help. It's not, as Professor Qumsiyeh said, we are not here to just advocate for armed resistance. The resistance in spirit is the whole thing that we have to make sure that we are containing. of course, people in Iran have more freedom. I mean, there is no comparison to defend the Palestinian cause. And the Islamic Republic, since the day one of the revolution, has been raising the flag of the liberation of Palestinians. But in different levels all around the world, we have to maintain and also increase the level of advocacy that we have for the Palestinian cause. The worst thing can happen is forgetting the cause of Palestine because of the genocide, because that makes people feel uncomfortable to actually encounter every day with the genocide. So maybe it's easier for them to leave it aside and think about their daily life, but that's not going to help the Palestinians. Keep talking about it and keep educating. It's not just about talking, it's also about educating. For example, right now we have so many pro-Palestinian forces and activists all around the world, as again Professor mentioned. But in some occasions, unfortunately, there is a limit for their support for Palestine. For example, if there is a red flag for supporting Hezbollah, or if there is a red flag for supporting Iran, maybe they decide to stop there. But there shouldn't be no stop for supporting Palestine, whether it's civil support or armed support or armed resistance. All of it has to be taught in the school of resistance. It doesn't need to be limited at schools. It should be everywhere, educating especially Western people, because they are used to be deceived by their mainstream media that the narrative their media has been feeding them is the reality. That, I think, that has already been exposed, that has already been broken, but deepening the education and knowledge about the Palestinian cause. For example, it's not about religious fight. It's not about Jewish-Muslim fight. It's not. It's about colonialism. It's about invading the country and pure racism. It's about a state that is claiming has to be only Jewish state, that is literally talking about raw racism. So also, I have to add that the story of Palestine is not a metaphor to say it's about the liberation of all around the people, all around the globe for people, because we have China that has the experience of being invaded by Japanese. We have African countries. We have Australian indigenous. We have Canadian indigenous people in US. All of them are seeing the same history of their land being stolen today with Gaza. So if they support Palestinian cause, if they support what is happening right now against the apartheid, against the occupation and genocide, that means a freedom for themselves. So as I finished my speech, that freedom for Palestine is freedom for all of us. It's not rhetoric. It's actually going to dismantle the current global order that is built up on oppression and on occupation and colonialism.
Thank you very much. I want to ask if Mr. Gholamzadeh want to add any other points. Okay, so he's not with us. I just want to thank you all who joined us in this webinar on Pathways to Peace in Palestine, Solution and Challenges. I want to end this webinar with a sentence by Professor Qumsiyeh in one of his articles. He says, "Stay human and keep hope alive." Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. And if people want
Thank
to
you so much.
communicate with me, please email me. I can put my email in the chat, and we can stay in touch.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.